Hello and welcome to today's Friday Facebook Live with GrowTraffic. Today we are talking about all things security. Now don't groan because it's not as boring as it sounds. It's actually going to be quite interesting, I promise you. So thinking about the situations that businesses are in at the moment, which is what we're trying to do with all of these Facebook Lives and trying to create content that's going to be useful to people and businesses. But obviously with the recent COVID situation and lockdown, the place that businesses find themselves in at the moment has changed massively. We've got businesses that have got premises that have been stood empty. We've got businesses that have got staff working remotely. We've got staff working on their own private laptops and nobody knows whether they've got any security installed. We've got businesses sharing passwords left, right and centre and all logging into the same online platforms and stuff. We've also got to think about the data protection and GDPR side of things. So if we're all sharing information left, right and centre, you know, are we sure that people's data is being kept secure and that everything's as it should be, because the consequences of not doing it properly are quite severe, as the past few months have shown us. So that's what we're talking about today. Online security, offline security, data protection security, building security, all of that stuff that keeps your business safe and secure. You might notice, the eagle eyes amongst you might notice that there's only three of us. We are going to be joined by Mark Kirker from Spencer Hayes, but he's having some difficulties logging on at the moment. So he's going to join us as soon as he can. In the meantime, we've got two people who have spent a career working in IT and know a lot about that side of things. So, Paul, what's your name and where do you come from?
So my name's Paul. I'm from Donegal in Ireland. We're a small software consultancy business called Henderson Technical Solutions.
Marvellous, thank you. And Joan, what's your name? Where do you come from?
I'm Joan Bailey. I live in Garstang in Lancashire, and I run a very small IT business called Ladybird Computing, helping people with their computing problems.
Marvellous. But as I say, both of you have worked in IT and computing and all that, what I call the technical side of things for quite a long time, yeah. And I know Joan is, I've been working with Joan over the past year for the Seroptimists, which if you know me, you'll know what the Seroptimists are. If you don't know me and don't know what they are, Google them because they're amazing. But Joan has been telling me off for the last year about my lax attitude to security. So this is why I asked her to today, because I think she'd be a perfect addition. So without a further ado, I'm going to come to each of you in turn and ask you, what is your experience in terms of security and data protection, all that? Where do you stand on it? What's your current situation? Give me your initial thoughts, please. So, Paul, I'm coming to you again first.
Okay. So throughout my career, I've focused a lot on people's personal data. I spent a long time working for a lone worker safety company. So we captured a lot of people's personal details, names, addresses, dates of birth, and some medical information, which was quite sensitive. So it was all pertinent to information while they were working by themselves. If anything went wrong, we had to store that data. So we had to be, ultra sure we stored everything in, very secure locations. So we made sure that we chose data centers that were ISO 27001 compliant, that were compliant to PCI DSS, that they had, they signed up to the penetration testing type system, so that we knew that our data, if someone tried to hack it, at least the front door wasn't lying open. There are lots of horror stories out there with companies who take security seriously, ultra strong passwords, ultra strong locations, etc. But they've left an admin password as password during development, and basically the front door is wide open and someone just walks in like that. So you've got to be ultra careful. We can all have as strong a password as we like, but you've got to make sure that back doors into your system aren't lying wide open for customers there. So yeah, we took it very seriously. We had to sign up to the data protection guidelines, or GDPR now. And we're very lucky that in the sort of 11, 12 years of that, we didn't have any data breaches. But it's quite a serious situation. If you have a data breach, you have to inform your customers and inform GDPR as well, because there are some significant fines out there. I think they're upwards of 10 million if you don't report a data breach. And quite often as well, a lot of organizations actually will never know if they've had a data breach. So you only hear about the big ones, once people's data has been used for malicious purposes. But quite often, companies get targeted by hackers. They just want your data. If you've got a record of 200,000 names or 1 million names, they'll just take it, they'll stick it on the dark web, and they'll flog it for a few quid. And they'll flog it onto someone else who wants to use that information. And they'll come in quietly, just copy your data and go again. And it's not like ransomware or where someone locks out your account. So a lot of organizations out there actually don't know if they've had a data breach, which is quite a serious thing as well.
How do they find out?
So after a while, basically, people's information may have been used, maybe a bit of detective work. Someone's information about a certain topic or subject or them was only stored in one place, and they'll know about it. Or they'll have done a review of logs and they'll say that they've been accessed by somewhere that they shouldn't have been accessed from. Or down the line, they'll have done pen testing on their system and realized that they've had a serious vulnerability that they didn't know about to begin with. So there's no one way of knowing, but data sometimes the dark web is swept for details. So if my information's on there and my company name's in that data, and someone approaches me and goes, "Oh, well, we found your information, for sale." So quite often there's various ways that people find out. There are a few technical ways you find out, but quite often people only find out they've had a breach when someone goes, "Boy, I want 10 grand just to to give you your server back because we've got all your data encrypted." So I've seen that happen.
Sorry, Paul, to interrupt. Part of the kind of thing. I mean, I do admit I have quite a lax attitude to security, but I think part of my attitude comes from, I think, my data's already out there. It's probably already on the dark web. It's probably already been sold hundreds of times to people. So, there's not a point in me stressing about it. I know that's obviously my personal data. As a business owner, I have to think very differently about that. But I think a lot of the time I just say, oh, it's a Pandora's box. It's opened, isn't it? What are we going to do about it now? So it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess, but as systems get more advanced, people can piece together your information. So, you're probably right. Your information probably has been being sold somewhere along the line. But it depends on if chunks of data and from different databases, from different sources, can get stitched together. So just to give someone an awful lot more detail about you. And we can all find out, like public records offices are great. A lot of people don't know that your birth cert and your marriage cert and all that stuff is all public record. If I really want to go find your date of birth and your details, I can do so quite easily and legally. But if you start stitching information together, you can soon, pull together an awful lot of very powerful data that can seriously affect your life. So, you probably have the same attitude as a lot of people. Like, I've got a password. It's fairly secure. It's at least 8 characters. It's got, nice little symbols and smiley faces in it, so it's all good. But those passwords, can and do regularly get hacked. And if you've got, if you look up, what are the top 20 passwords that people use, and it's just shocking that the amount of them that are still in use. So these guys, they're out there on the dark web, they buy just a bunch of data, and they may not have your password, but they'll take 1 million records, they'll apply the top 20 password to those 1 million records, and all of a sudden they've got access to 50,000 accounts, which is a lot of information. So it's a numbers game for them, really.
Yeah, we are going to come back to passwords because I think that's a really important thing we need to cover. But Joan, in the meantime, I know Mark is still struggling to get on in case you're wondering why we've got a blank square there. But Joan, what's your background? Why do you care about data security and IT security?
Well, I've spent most of my working life in the public sector, mainly in NHS pensions. I've been in IT for 33 years now. I was involved with data protection when it was called the Data Protection Act, long before the GDPR. I was IT security manager for many years and a certified information security manager. So it really was my day-to-day job. But I've been doing it so long that everything I do, think about, involves security. And when I'm talking to some optimists and they tell me that they use the same password in Canva and everything else, I start getting very, very twitchy and pointing out that, yes, Canva has had major security breaches. I hope you changed your password after the security breaches. And please don't use the same password anywhere else. I also write a little article once a month in some local magazines on the topic. Just my mission, I don't care who I talk to, people ring me up after the articles, and I'll tell them anything they need to know. I'm not trying to sell them anything. I just want people not to have problems.
I think what I like that, you know, it's admirable that you care, but I think the thing that people have, or the misconception that people have, is that they always think it's the same as any crime, isn't it? You always think, well, it's not going to happen to me. You know, well, yes, I know people's data gets stolen. Yes, I know people's accounts get cloned, and that, you know, people get money stolen, but it's not going to happen to me, so I'm all right. But I presume each of you has heard some horror stories that have happened to actual people of what's gone wrong, or businesses that have been fined. Jo, do you know any?
I don't personally know any businesses that have been fined. I mean, there's obviously been plenty in the news over the years, and you know, Talk being one major example. But there's been lots of businesses that have been fined who have maybe struggled afterwards because they've lost so much data and had so much system downtime. I mean, just on a minute level, one of the things I bang on about to people is make sure you know what your passwords actually are. I had a small business who was running everything. She was selling stuff in various different places, but running everything through a single email address that was with Tiscali. Her laptop died. We had to build a new one. Didn't know what her password was. Tiscali doesn't exist anymore. It's TalkTalk. TalkTalk couldn't reset it. Password gone. Lost a lot of customers. You know, set a new one up. But just a little thing like not knowing your password can cause so many problems. And people don't realise that that is also part of IT security. It's
yeah, being able to retrieve it as much as making sure you've got a secure one. Yeah, Paul, what about you? Have you heard any?
So yeah, I mean, not anybody that's been fined in general, but just how people have, you know, ended up costing businesses a lot of money. So I used to work with a company that had a sister company, and they had their finance system hacked and encrypted, and basically ransomware. They were asked to pay a sum of money in order to have that data restored. Now, luckily, they had good practice. They had a lot of offsite backups of their systems. They only lost a couple of days worth of information. And they were a reasonable sized business, but they were able to piece together from emails and from just conversations and staff. They were able to pick up most of the stuff that they'd missed and that stuff. So it can cost you quite a bit of money. So if you were a bit lax about things and didn't have an IT manager in place or weren't following those best practices, you can get into a lot of trouble. And even like things like ransomware, people as well. So a lot of scammers, the scam text messages that go out there that you get to your phone. Quite often, I used to always wonder, like, well, how do these guys do it? Because you've got to sign up to a service with a credit card in your name, but quite often they basically try and hack known vulnerabilities in SMS platforms. So the SMS platforms get hacked, and then they use that to deliver tens of thousands of text messages out there, and there's no traceability back to the to the scammers themselves. So from start to finish, it's usually one big hack along the way to try and get those things in place.
I think the thing as well that it's a common misconception, really, because people say, obviously we read in the paper about the massive horror stories that happen to companies and or people or whatever, and they're fined hundreds of thousands of pounds, and that can shut a company down. But even those small ones, like both of you have just said then about your situation, like it wasn't that big, they'd recovered it in a couple of days. Well, a couple of days out of your business is still an awful lot of time and money for business. And if you are a sole trader, if you're a plumber or an interior designer or something, and you're losing 2 days worth of work, or you're losing even just a few hours worth of work, and you've got to go back, and that's costing money. So again, it's just, why would you not take those simple measures that would stop that happening in the first place? And I think sometimes it comes back to that. People don't think it's going to happen to them, do they?
Exactly, that's what I was just going to say. Carry on. People just don't.
We've got a bit of a lag on.
I think we've got a time delay, do we? No.
We have. Keep talking, Paul. It's fine.
So I mean, until it happens to you, you never think it's going to happen to you. And you're right. For anybody running a small business, I mean, it's the same as even if someone was purely, pen and paper, and you carried your receipt book in your van, and you're a plumber, your van breaks down or goes on fire, but you just literally, how do I know who owes me money? How do I know what I need to get back up and running? Who are my orders for the next 2 weeks in a row? You're dead in the water. And your IT security is exactly the same. If you lose access to all your information, so it's your finances, it's your records, it's your customer base, it's who owes me what. And that can leave you pretty much dead in the water. So you've got to make sure that you've got your backups in place, and it doesn't matter if it's pen and paper or if it's electronic.
Yeah, and I am going to introduce Mark in one sec, because obviously you can see he's joined us. But just on that point as well, even in terms of thinking about tax returns, stuff, you've got to keep your records for so many years. If somebody comes back and audits you, you've got to be able to show what was going on. So even if at the time it's not an issue, you could still be at risk from data losses. Several years down the line, if suddenly someone's coming after you for an audit and I lost it. It's not an excuse, is it? You're being in big trouble. Anyway, I'm just going to introduce Mark. So welcome, Mark. Mark Kirker from the Spencer Hayes Group. Do you want to tell us, Mark, who you are and what you do?
Other than very late, I had an absolute stinker. So I tried it. I didn't have the logins for Facebook, so unfortunately, I have to try my phone, my laptop, my wife's laptop, and finally here on my wife's phone.
Thank you for persevering. I really appreciate that.
No problem. I'm here now. So, I'm Mark Kirk. I'm a director at the Spencer Hayes Group. We're predominantly a commercial insurance brokerage, but we also runs a risk management consultancy. Because we appreciate that nobody likes buying insurance, and nobody likes using it. So if we can put certain measures in place to assist in preventing claims and preventing losses, then it results in lower claims, lower premiums. So happy client, happy insurer. So win-win.
Yeah, and so when we're thinking of, I said at the beginning, which I know you didn't hear, but I was saying in my head when I was thinking about today's session, I was thinking about virtual and real padlocks, and how do you make sure your business has got padlocks in the right places to keep it secure. So I know data security, which is what we were just talking about when you joined us, is one of the things you cover, but you also cover things like making sure businesses are protected from fire risk and flood damage and all the rest of it. Is there any other areas as well that you cover?
Yeah, when you're talking about the physical elements, there's only so much you can do. Believe you me, if somebody wants to get into your property, I have seen them get in some weird and wonderful ways. So there's, I know I've got some funny stories on that, but they can get in. And the thing is, you can only do so much. And if you go over the top with this physical security, then anybody walking by will look at that and think, wow, what's in there? There must be something really, really precious in there or high value. So it can be counterproductive. Now, quite a few of the measures that you can do aren't surrounding the physical security. There's all sorts of measures that you can put in place just to help alleviate things. So you've already touched on the cyber security, which is less of the physical aspect, but there's also things like robust health and safety, robust HR that helps your employees, staff, and the public and keep them safe. Whereas it doesn't really imply a theft risk. However, there's only so much you can do, and when you're looking at things like law, you've always got to put yourself in perhaps the insurer's shoes on what they would want. So some people will have an alarm system, and it goes to the director's phone, and the director will go and visit the premises. But what happens if his phone runs out of battery? What happens if he's had a few beers? What happens if he's miles away or gone out? So they are varying elements over protection that you can get, but you would it depends on what you've been there. So if
I think that the thing there that sorry, Mark, we've got a delay on the line again, which means we're cutting into each other. So I apologise. I think the thing there, one of the things that you just brought up was you're saying about it's about proving that you've at least tried to put a best practice in place, isn't it? And I think this is something that follows through online as well. You are never going to be entirely secure. You are always going to be under attack, whether it be from burglars or it be from cyber criminals or fraudsters or anything. They're always going to be trying, and they're usually going to be one step ahead. But I think it's about proving that you've been able to think through a process, put a plan in place. All right, it might not be perfect, but I suppose that at least protects you if you've taken the basic measures that you need to, doesn't it?
Yeah, it shows. One of the biggest things is showing that you've considered it. So you've looked at it and you've either said, I've considered it, I'm happy to take that risk, or I've considered it and this is a level I'm going to go to. Because the same goes for cybersecurity, the same goes to physical security. If they want to access something, or if they want to, unless you're putting armed guards on there, or the Ministry of Defence, then there's only so much you can do. You'd have your second line of defence, which in effect is an insurance policy that sits behind it. Now, you won't want it coming to that, but you've got to recognise the fact that there's only so much you can do as a company, and like I say, if you do too much, then it'll spark maybe thieves' interest over what's in there.
I must admit, that's another thing, because I was explaining to the other two that I have a slightly lax attitude to security, and I have to point out, because Hannah's doing the commentary today on this, and she's putting Rachel might have a lax attitude to security. GrowTraffic does. Absolutely right, because Hannah is hot on this stuff. So GrowTraffic is fine. I'm talking about myself only here. But I do have that similar attitude to my personal stuff. I've got horses. I've got 3 horses in a field. There's no padlock on the gate because, again, I think if they're going to come and steal my horses, they're going to turn up with bolt cutters and a horse box, and they're going to be ready to steal them. So, I could put, like you say, I could make it Fort Knox out there, but whatever I do, if they're determined to do it, then they'll come and do it. But as somebody else pointed out to me, but it's about putting those basic measures. Say, for example, if the field down the road has a padlock on and mine doesn't, then they're more likely going to come to mine because I'm easier to steal. So it's about taking precautionary measures, isn't it? So that you are not the most obvious target. And I think that's one of the things that is important that you get across to businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Like I mentioned previously, there is only so much you can do, but if you don't do the minimums, then you are leaving yourself exposed, and you don't want to be sat there and say probably won't happen, because probably won't happen means probably will happen, and that's where your issue arises. But I know it sounds as though I'm going against the grain, especially speaking about insurance, but you can only do so much. So if you've got a robust alarm in there, if you've got adequate locks in there, then there's CCTV that might help sort of prevent it from happening. If they say, "Oh, I don't fancy that," but we have seen cases with very high levels of security. I mean, one thing that has cropped up a couple of times is in warm weather, which doesn't happen around here very often, is people leaving fire doors open, and they leave fire doors open, and they knock the sensor off it. And they knock the sensor off it, or sometimes they've snuck in and hid away in the toilet, and then robbed it from inside out. So you sometimes got to be a little bit careful when you're just thinking, "Oh, nothing's going to happen here." because they're watching.
Yeah. Joe, you were going to come in then and say something. What were you going to say?
It was really on the lines of, get a certain level of security on, because they'll go for the easy targets. Paul mentioned about, if a database with 1 million records is taken and they sweep through and they can identify 50,000 passwords. If you're in the other bunch and you had a really good password, then you're a little bit more secure than the 50,000 who had a really stupid password, and therefore their doors are open now.
Yeah.
So you've got to do something. And cybersecurity is it's just the same as the physical security. Like you were talking about 2 fields with padlocks, same with cybersecurity, electronic security. They'll go for the easy target. So at least you don't have to be the most protected thing in the world. You just have to be better than other people.
Yes, and that's a really interesting point, because that's what I say to clients. If you want to rank number 1 online, you've only got to be better than the person that's currently ranking number 1 online, and sometimes that might be a really crap website. So it isn't always that you have to be absolutely top dog. You just have to be better than the competition, don't you? Better than the next guy in order to be safe. So we've talked a bit about the implications for businesses of what happens if they get it wrong, and we have mentioned passwords a couple of times now, so I want to cover it. There are some really basic rules about passwords, and Joan, I know this is one of your hot topics. So if you were giving somebody advice on passwords, what would your top tips be?
And it's difficult to give it one single tip, because you've got to do everything. It's got to be unique. You've got to have a different password for every single thing. And absolutely never have your email password the same as anything else. Once the bad guys have got hold of your email password, the rest of your life is screwed. Because every account you have will run through your email account. And if they've got control of your email account, you're stuffed. So unique passwords, strong passwords.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. You told me, and I didn't realise this. You said once they've got a password, they will just try that password for everything, just on the off chance you've used it. And again, you don't realise that, do you?
No, and if they try and log into something, your Amazon account or whatever, with the wrong password, they'll click on the reset password. It'll get sent to the email. They've already got control of your email. Boom, your Amazon account is compromised, and so on. So they've got to be unique. They've got to be strong. Try and change them regularly, but if you don't change them regularly, at least change them as soon as you've heard that there has been a breach on Canva and that you had an account with them. My brain's gone, sorry. Make sure the uniqueness thing. Years ago in my previous life, I used to walk around the building and point out to people, don't have your password written on that post-it on the front of your screen, please. These days I say, please write it down. Don't leave it necessarily stuck on your screen, but your risk is not that people's going to come into your house and see it. Your risk is that somebody electronically will get in. You need to have good passwords written down and the other information that goes with it. So when you create an account, it'll ask you for some security questions. I don't know how many people I've sat with, and we've gone through a reset process, and it's asked, who was your favourite teacher at school, or what was the name of your best friend when you were 6? And they go, I don't remember doing that. I have no idea what the answer is.
Yeah.
So write it down. Key. Put it in a drawer out the way. But these days, the risk is not that somebody's going to nick your passwords that you've written down and left lying around. They're going to get in through the back door.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, did you have something to add on passwords there?
So, yes, it's worthwhile checking every now and again. There are websites available that you can just pop your email address into, and it'll scan to see if your account has been compromised or has been part of a data breach. So I used just a promo video website, creating your own promotional videos before, and I popped my email address in just onto one of those sites to check, and I didn't know they had a breach. So obviously my data was stolen in a breach that they had. And because, I don't know about the rest of you, but my email account is a complete disaster because I have something like 2,500 unread emails, and they've all gone into different labels and forums, and I just don't have time to read them all or want to read them all. So I'd imagine there's an email in there that tells me that company had a data breach and I should change my password, and I didn't. So it's worthwhile just dropping your emails. There's one called Have I Been Pwned? PWNED. And just drop your email to that, and that'll tell you if you've been compromised. Rachel, I suggest you don't do it, considering your attitude to it. It might scare you.
Yeah, there's about 8 for you, Rachel.
Right. Yeah, probably is. I think there's another one. I don't know whether it was you, Joan, that circulated this, but somebody was telling me about it. There's a website where you can put your password in and it will tell you, it tells you roughly how long it would take somebody to crack it. So I put one of my passwords in and it came back as something like 45 seconds. That's
quite good, actually.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called. Go on, Mark.
Sorry, we're all good here because our Facebook password's that strong that even we don't know it.
I know, that's the thing, but we were saying before, it's as bad to forget it as it is to use the same one. I think the other thing that just for, businesses need to bear in mind as well is and this is one thing that we used to be guilty of, is that we would buy one login for something, say if it was a platform that we were using, and then we'd all just use the same one. So we'd have me in Bacup and Hannah in Rotherham and Alicia in Rotherham, all of us all over the north, logging in to the same account using the same passwords. And actually, I presume it's actually safer to everybody to have their own logins as well, so that you're not sharing passwords across multiple sites. Am I right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay.
A lot of companies don't let you. You've got to pay more licenses, so there is a big temptation there to share usernames, share passwords, because as small growing businesses, you don't always want to pay mad licensing fees. So there's a big temptation there, but you really shouldn't.
I think that's the risk for all businesses, isn't it? It's that whole thing of, well, it's a little bit cheaper to do it this way now. But actually, it might be cheaper to do it that way now, but you're storing, if something goes wrong and you have that practice in place, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more money further down the line, isn't it, in fines and stuff. Just in terms of data protection, obviously keeping people's data secure since GDPR came in is one of the key things that we all need to think about. So have there been any, or do you think there are any increased risks to businesses now with data? Again, once upon a time, we had everybody working in an office and your data was kept securely in the filing cabinet that presumably was locked and kept behind an office door. And now we've got data all over the place and in the clouds. Is that posing any more risks? Paul, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I generally look through the logs on all different types of servers that we manage, and the sheer number of attempts that we get for people to try and access servers, they're just like brute force attacks. They're trying a root password, and the 20 most common passwords. It's just rammed with logs, and the IP addresses they're all from the same countries. You get, well, I'm not mentioning the countries, but you can tell where they come from, and you go, right, well, obviously these are people that have just, they're not targeting us specifically. They're just scanning a wide range of IP addresses, and they're using again, it's a numbers game. They're just using the root user plus here the generic passwords we use. So as a business, you've got to be a bit more wary of it. So we ban people after 10 attempts from an IP address. We ban that IP address at the firewall, so it doesn't even get to the point where it can even attempt to put in a password. So a lot of companies out there, if they don't do that, you can actually have your website flooded. It's almost like a denial of service attack, but it's actually someone just loads and loads of attempts at trying to crack your password. And things like WordPress websites, because a lot of websites have something.com/WP admin, and that gets you into your admin panel, and they'll just sit and hammer away at that all day if there are no restrictions in place of how many attempts they can have. So we're just seeing growth is like that in terms of attacks and requests to try and access data. So it's constant, but as you said, as long as we're secure, those password websites, we generate sort of 50 character random strings. It's not a password, it's just a random string that we can use to crack it in there. You go onto the websites and put those in, and they can take months and months to crack. So I myself use it. I think it's a 10 character password, random one, and I pop it into those little website password crackers that you said, and mine takes something like 9 weeks to crack. So I'm fairly happy with that. It's 10 characters. It's a string. it's absolutely meaningless. So,
Yeah.
you know, if someone guesses that, it's an absolute random guess, and that's as secure as you can, you know, can be in that terms. So yeah, be careful. Have it written down somewhere. Don't have an Excel file on your desktop that says password.
Passwords.
You know, it's okay building the castle and fortified walls and then just handing the keys over to somebody. You know, it doesn't make sense. So,
yeah. I think, you know, that's if you were running a business, you know, obviously you have an IT manager or a website company or something, you would hope that they would be taking care of making sure, but obviously businesses need to be aware of that. But if I bring it down to the kind of small business personal level that people are on, when you say there about having you know, an Excel spreadsheet with the passwords on, so many people have those. I mean, I know, you know, if people are going to have an Excel spreadsheet, for example, that has data on, John, I'm going to ask you this one. Is that all right if they password protect it, or is it better if they use something like Google Docs, or is the advice just don't have spreadsheets with data on at all?
With password type data?
Yeah.
Yeah. Preferably not. I mean, if you've got a lot and you want to do it sensibly, there are very good password management apps that you can use. So with those, you have a master password, which you make really, really, really long and complicated, and then that looks after all the logins to your websites, etc. And you can get it to pre-fill once you've logged in with your master password. Some of those only work on whatever machine you've installed it on. Some of them will work across platforms. So I actually use one which logs me into websites on my laptop. It also works on my on my desktop, on my laptop, and on the iPad. So if you're going to want to keep them electronically, use a proper password management tool. If you absolutely I usually see them as Word docs on people's machines. Yes. If you have to have one, please do put a really good password on it, and please don't call it passwords. But I wouldn't advocate it.
No, I think the other thing as well, just on that, I have Google Chrome. I use Google Chrome as my browser. That shares, it saves, your passwords, doesn't it? Is that a bad idea?
The problem with Google Chrome is that you can see the passwords in plain text through the back of the browser. If you have to log into your machine, Google Chrome will also ask you to log in with that password first of all to show you the passwords. But it is, it is possible to see the passwords. Now, that has come in handy occasionally with my customers who go, oh no, I don't know what my password is, and we've managed to find it. But again, it's not something I would strongly recommend.
So again, it just comes back to that. It's about having that kind of basic level and thinking about it. And yet, yes, of course, it's easy to have one password. We all have hundreds of them now. But just use a little bit of common sense and say, don't have the same one. Don't store them somewhere obvious. If you are going to store them somewhere obvious, call it something different and make sure it's behind the password itself.
A really good password.
Yeah, and don't use autofill because I know when you're using it that it's not safe. So yeah, Mark, I want to ask you from a kind of insurance point of view, because before you came on, we were talking about how COVID has changed the landscape for businesses, and now obviously we've got more people working remotely and buildings that are empty and all that sort of stuff. Have you seen any kind of increase in terms of claims or people insuring more for how COVID has impacted this? Basically, are there more frauds about? Are there more people worrying about this sort of stuff, do you think?
Well, it's it might be the cynic in me that I've been doing it for 26 years, but I fully anticipated that due to everybody knowing that there's business premises that are empty, I thought I'd start to see a few break-ins, but I've not. Normally what would happen with an insurance policy, they'll give you X amount of days for the building to be empty, and it might be 30 days, 45, sometimes up to 60. Insurers have adapted on this, and they've extended that period, so they've gone up to 90, and then it's up for review, and then they'll review it beyond then. So because if you go beyond that period, they'll exclude all the things that are more likely to happen with a building being unoccupied. And one thing they'll take off is theft and malicious damage, perhaps storm, burst pipes, things of that nature. But I've not seen the very odd few claim that comes in. Now, when I first started out, there was no such thing as cyber insurance; didn't exist. But it's changed now, and that's a real focus from a lot of insurers. And it's one insurance policy that I think is really prevalent. The main part is with people working from home, they're potentially working from their own laptops, which aren't as secure as their own, because they use it for their own personal basis, or they might be using pen drives, which again can be seen as insecure. Now, we've not had an influx of cyber claims, but I've heard that there has been an increased level because people are more chancing their arms because they know the guard's down. And it's really disappointing in a time like this. You'd think that people would at least have some morals, but they don't. It's more people getting hacked on an RT basis rather than physical break-ins, which surprised me.
And I've heard this anecdotally as well, and there's a few things been circulating online that I've seen, but I think that is the case. That I don't know for sure. I haven't seen any proper graphs or statistics or anything, but there just seem to be an awful lot more reports about cyber crimes and cyber fraud that's going on purely because of that. As a business, how do you go about securing and ensuring, Paul, I'm going to ask you this one, how would you ensure that your staff laptops, for example, are secure if you know that they're working on their own personal laptops and they're also running, all sorts of other things through it? Again, does it come down to use your common sense and try your best?
Well, some of it's common sense, but the problem with common sense is it's not all too common. So a lot of organizations out there make an inventory of, if someone's working from home, have they got Mac, have they got Windows, what version of, if someone were still running XP and stuff like that's no longer supported and there's vulnerabilities there, most businesses out there and get set up, have a VPN so people can, at least have VPN into an organization's private network, and that applies their restrictions to it. But of course, if make sure people don't download information onto their personal laptop. It's a data breach of sorts then. So, if I'm bringing spreadsheets down. So this is why I think, it's good. Google Docs and 365 and stuff like that's really good. Keep documents stored online in the cloud. Everyone works on them together. You don't have to worry about, your own personal data security. You don't have to worry about a pen drive getting lost on the train, these type of things. So it is a difficult one for organizations, and I'm not surprised to hear that Mark say that there's an increase in it, because if you have an old laptop from home because you've got a nice sparkling new workstation at work, and it's got all the bells and whistles. The last thing you want to do at home is go on your laptop. You've no real need for it. So people don't maybe take their own personal IT security that seriously. So then if you start working on something that's insecure, then by default that information then becomes unsecure as well. So there are a lot of organizations. I've spoken to an organization recently who are completely remote. They do IT support, but they're in the region of a few thousand staff, but everybody works from home. But they've got a rigorous checklist. You must have this version of Windows. You must have a dedicated phone line. You can't have Wi-Fi. You must be hardwired to a router. You have to have two lines in your home, one for your personal and one for work as well. And obviously they pay additional for this, but they're basically trying to make their systems as secure as possible without actually having a premises where they can do that. So it is a rigorous checklist for them to go through, and I think more businesses should do that. And when it comes to small businesses, just I don't work with any more than about 4 or 5 people. So we take the common sense approach, but we're lucky we're in the IT and IT security world where we know the common sense approach to take. So if you're at home, make sure your laptop, your operating system's up to date. It's still supported by the manufacturer. Make sure your antivirus is up to date for malware as well, and to get a VPN, and it just makes you more secure. And these things don't cost an awful lot of money these days. So a bit of common sense and a small spend goes an awful long way. Like you said earlier, the cost of doing nothing can be very, very high. So spend small now. You don't have to spend big in the future. Or Mark, going after Mark's company, asking them, we need to be insured against this. So, and I'm sure Mark don't want to pay out all that for people's laxness on IT security. So yeah,
I mean, you're absolutely right. And this is, like you say, for small businesses, it is that again, you think it's a cost, don't you? It's a cost that small businesses don't want to pay, especially at the moment. Why would we be buying all our staff laptops when we don't know how we're going to keep running and stuff? But it is crucial, isn't it? And it's crucial that businesses have it for accountability. But it's good practice for ordinary people, whether you're in business or not. And I know, Joe, this is one of the things that you're particularly hot on, if you're just a normal person searching the internet, browsing the internet, doing online shopping, doing your banking online, all this stuff, this is stuff people really should be getting right anyway, isn't it? Not waiting for a business reason to do it.
It is, but it's often the business reason that actually suddenly forces people to think about it. But even if you're a small business and you've got a few staff working from home, you can't afford to give them the laptop. But you've got to stop and think and do your risk assessment so that you can then tell your staff, right, we want you to work from home. We know you're going to use your laptop. As Paul said, this is a list of things you've got to do. Make sure it's a suitable operating system. Make sure it's fully protected with antivirus, which does regular scans as well as live running. Make sure that you are not downloading work documents, or if you are saving them in this way to this particular sort of place, and you are not putting them on a pen drive. One other thing I would also strongly recommend is that there needs to be a policy that says, look, if you're using that laptop for business purposes, either you do not let your children anywhere near it, or you at least set them up with restricted children's accounts which they use separately. I've had one customer this week who was whinging that he was getting an awful lot of spam suddenly. So I went onto the website where you can check the email address to see if it's in any breaches. And it was in a breach of a children's gaming platform, which he hadn't realised that his granddaughter had signed up for this app playing on his laptop, and it had then been breached. So kids using a machine increases the risk exponentially. Don't let them use it, or at least make them use it in a separate environment, with a lockdown account, and not to use your own email account for logging into games.
That's a really important point, isn't it? Because at the moment, I've got my 10-year-old at home, and as you're saying that again, I realised I've signed him in using my Google email address to sign him up for something, and I thought that was being responsible, because I thought I'm using mine, so everything he does I can see it. Is anything he pays for is linked through my PayPal, so I can see it, I can stop it. I thought that was the right thing to do, but I mean, obviously that's nothing to do with work. This is a personal thing. But yes, again, it's just thinking you've got to have that separation, haven't you? And that accountability of being.
Fine to have the email account in your name, but not to be your main email account. Set another one up for Rachel that you let him log in with, and then you're monitoring it to see what happens. But it's not your account's email address that appears in the breaches.
And at the moment, they've got children at home. Children want to be on laptops, and a lot of them at the moment are getting their schoolwork through the internet. I know Leon's school is providing work for them to do through the school website, and obviously most people don't. The children don't have separate laptops, so there is that. Again, there's that thing of it's kind of expected that your child will need to use your laptop to download the schoolwork, even do the schoolwork. Leon has a tutor, and that runs through Google Classroom, and she provides work through that. Now, Leon does have his own laptop. He only got it like this Christmas just gone, but I recognise that most kids don't, do they? So it's all very well saying, well, you shouldn't let your child use your laptop, but I think a lot of parents at the moment will be in the position where they've not got a lot of choice about it.
So set them up with a secondary account that's not an admin account. It's quite easy to do. It just means that they have to log in and out or switch user when they come to use it. But, otherwise, the risk is huge.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. Again, something else I hadn't thought of. We're coming up to 50 minutes, so I'm conscious we're running out of time. We've talked a lot about that. I did want to touch on kind of staff security and keeping your staff safe from a lone work point of view, but we haven't got time. So instead, I'm gonna go to the question that I ask everybody each week. But obviously, it comes in different contexts. But are there any apps, platforms, systems, tools, anything like that you have found particularly useful that ordinary people, so not techie people, could use that would really help them? Paul, I'm going to come to you first. Is there anything that is just useful for people to keep them secure?
Yeah, so just around passwords, I use an app called LastPass. So it's a password vault, ultra secure master key password, and stores everything in there then, because we've all got we're told we need to use different passwords for everything. It's really good, and it'll ping you and tell you you've used this password on at least one or two other websites. You should consider having a different one on there. So that's and that's across all platforms, and Android, iOS, Mac, desktop, Windows, the lot.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. Mark, I know data is not your area, but are there any apps that or platforms or systems that you recommend to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly an app. This is purely on the bit because you what alarm systems you can get, and these varying levels. These varying levels of locks. Nothing complicated. Things like CCTV. But recently, this is more keeping your staff safe because they're going back to the office now. Is a system called VirusSafe, and it's just something that checks the corner of the eye just for temperature, and this is more surrounded protecting your employees' liability. I think it's Alert that do it, and also systems for washing hands that don't allow you to open the door without washing your hands going through it, and some fire door systems. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd check out the website. It's Alert Fire and Security, VirusSafe that I found really interesting. I'll certainly be speaking to my clients about it.
I think that's a whole other area. We have got a session coming up actually about kind of what businesses need to do to prepare for the reopening. But again, that's a whole new level of security that we haven't even touched on, have we? It's that keeping your building, your staff, your process, everything secure in terms of viruses. But yeah, things like that are going to have to be certainly things that enter people's radars, aren't they? Hannah's going to put it on the comments for us. What did you say it was called, Mark? Alert?
It's Alert Fire and Security, and it's VirusSafe
Right.
that they've got. That it's. I always look at all the different things that could assist a client just to help prevent a claim coming in or an issue coming in, and that's one recently that probably falls in line with security that really piqued my interest.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Joan, anything from you, apps, systems?
I'll try and squash a couple in. To go with Paul, I'll offer Norton Password Manager or Norton Identity Safe. I don't know what its name is at the moment, which I've used for donkey's years. It was one of the first ones. But there's some very good government type advice places to go and look for advice on keeping both cyber security and physical security. There's Secured by Design. .com, which has got various sets of security information. The ncsc.gov.uk, which is the National Cyber Security Centre, has got small business advice leaflets. And getsafeonline.org is another good source of security advice.
Fab. I think Hannah's got those, so she will put those on there. But I will, as soon as we finish this session anyway, you can all go, and if you've got any apps, any platform systems that you want anybody to use, as well as your own contact details, please do go on and put them in the comments here. Hannah, just asked Hannah, she said there is a question from Donna. How often do you suggest training your staff in IT security? I presume one of the questions now will be, one of the things now will be, any training that was done will need to be done again because of COVID. But Paul, what do you think? How often should staff be trained?
In terms of IT security, I think the systems do most of the work for you. It's the simple things like you said, don't write passwords down. So, you know, I think annually refreshed is fine. People generally let the systems do the work for you, and as long as you adhere to the guidelines, and I think annually is fine. Yeah,
Joan, what about you? This is training that you provide, really, isn't it? How to keep staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's sort of how long's a piece of string. Annually is generally fine. You certainly need to do training when there's something new happening. If you change the way you work, like, you know, everybody's now working from home, let's maybe push out some training material to help people cope with that, because they're obviously having to think about things in a completely different way. And you know, maybe just a couple of times a year putting out some small bits of training on particular topics or anything that's changing in your particular work environment.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, so yeah, Joan and I have recently been involved in is creating, because through the Optimist website project that we've been doing, we've been creating little training videos to give people little bits of information in bite-size chunks, and they are on the website, so they are available to Sir Optimist whenever they want to see them. So I think, you know, I mean, we've done quite a few of those over the last couple of weeks. They take probably an hour each to do, don't they? And so I think that's probably quite a good, we used a system called Debut. If anyone wants to use that, it allows you to film your screen so that you can show people what you're doing. So even if you're not getting people together to provide new training, you can make sure you've got training resources, little videos, obviously guide PDFs, downloadable stuff, to keep your staff trained in all of this stuff, can't you? It's quite easy to do these days. Mark, from a kind of insurance and management point of view and stuff, is there a set rule in terms of, you know, if you saw a business that hadn't trained its staff in something for ages, would that be a warning signal to you that they need to start implementing some sort of more rigorous training?
What, on the IT side?
Yeah, or any kind of, say, security side, really, GDPR even.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't tend to be a stipulation, especially on things like cyber. It's more what the company processes are. So they never mention on training, unless you're going into liabilities where it's like health and safety certainly needs to be in there. But on cyber, it's more, you know, how often do you update your passwords? Are your emails encrypted? Do you use pen drives? What's this? So it's more like an overall, so not particular training that they really focus on. It's more the systems and controls that you've got in place.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. We are coming up to time, guys, so I'm going to wrap it up. As I say, there's a lot of stuff there. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we've discussed and talked about. There's an awful lot of stuff that we haven't covered. So we will probably return to this in another session, and I'll be coming back to you all to come back on. But for now, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I really appreciate you coming and giving your time. I'm just going to go around again and ask each of you for your one top tip. If you could give somebody one tip on security, what would it be? Paul, what would yours be?
Never use password as a password. Happens more than you think.
Password or QWERTY123 or...
Yeah. Mark, what would your one top tip be to somebody?
My top tip, I'll go into the physical security side, is don't look at it from a business owner's, through his eyes, look at it through a thief's eye, and then that will show you areas of frailty and weakness.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Actually, that's what I'm always saying to people, to our customers, is don't look at everything from what you want to say and what you want to do. Look at it from the point of view of your customer. What questions are they asking? What information do they need from you? So yeah, always put yourself in the other person's shoes. I think that's a really good tip. Yeah, Joan, what would your one top tip be?
This stuff is important. Bad things really do happen to people. Please take the time to stop and think.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I think if I was going to give one, it would be very, very similar. Actually, it would be don't think it's not going to happen to you, because chances are it will. And if you've just put some really simple processes and systems and security measures in place, you're at least, you know, reducing the risk and covering yourself in case it does. So once again, thank you so much to all of you. Please feel free to go onto the comments of this video on Facebook afterwards and add in your contact details. If people have any more questions for any of our panel, please do put them in the comments box. We'll still obviously be monitoring for a while to come. Thank you so much to all three of you for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm off now to go and spend some time outdoors in the pouring rain, I think.
Yeah.